This is apropos. The US Treasury Secretary says a number of allies in the Gulf region and Asia have requested currency swap lines from the United States to help deal with energy shocks and other fallout from the war in the Middle East. Having borne the brunt of Iran's retaliatory attacks, many analysts believe the UAE may adopt the most significant policy changes in the region as a result of the conflict. Eliza Herbert has more.
American consumers are feeling the cost of the Iran war. While in Parliament, their government is considering a short-term loan, known as a currency swap line, to its oil-rich allies in the Gulf.
Many of our Gulf allies have requested swap lines. You would have just read about the UAE, and swap lines, whether it's from the Federal Reserve or the Treasury, are to maintain order in the dollar funding markets and to prevent the sale of the U.S. assets in a disorderly way.
Like all Gulf states, the United Arab Emirates trades its oil in the US dollar, reinforcing the currency's dominance of the global oil market and as the world's reserve currency. But with the Strait of Hormuz closure choking its oil and gas production, the UAE reportedly made a request last week to its US allies for financial support, alongside a subtle threat to switch selling its oil in the Chinese yuan, as Chinese flag tankers are some of the few to have made it through Iran's side of the blockade. Analysts, however, have been quick to point out that the UAE has deep pockets, and to question why the US needs to assist a country with around $1 trillion in assets and an estimated $270 billion in reserves.
There isn't anything obviously America first about a financial lifeline to one of the richest oil sheikdoms, if not the richest, just so it doesn't have to borrow in the market or sell assets.
Some say the UAE's request suggests it is discontent about absorbing the financial costs of the US and Israel's war with Iran, which has also damaged its energy infrastructure and Dubai's postcard image as a luxury tourist destination.
For more, we are joined now by Dr Kristi Diwan, Senior Resident Scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. Kristi, thanks so much for being with us on the programme. Let's start perhaps where that report ended with the UAE. The US, it's likely going to be providing financial support to the Emirate. Does that come as a surprise to you? And do you think it's actually going to come to it that the Emirate does actually need this line of financial support from Washington?
Well, it is a surprise to me. Of course, the UAE is one of the wealthiest countries per capita in the world. Even its own ambassador here to the United States mentioned recently that the UAE has at least $300 billion in foreign currency, and that it really does not need financial support or anyone questioning their financial stability. That's not needed, that they have a stability in what they're doing. So all I can imagine is that they're seeking this kind of big commitment from the United States as a way to sort of signal that and to sort of strategically, even in a more deep way, link themselves to the United States, because there's no question that they have definitely suffered losses and will continue to do so from this war.
And is there anger towards the United States in the region, do you think, over the fact that it's now having to absorb so much of the financial costs of this war?
Well, they haven't expressed that publicly. All of their formal statements, of course, have been very positive towards the United States and backing them within the war. But there's no question that behind the scenes, they're very frustrated. This was not a war that they sought. All of the countries there were very much in a position of détente with Iran on the eve of the war, trying to basically manage what was a really difficult situation. And I think as the war has gone on, the decision of the United States to strike some critical facilities in Iran that then has had Iran retaliate is another source of frustration. So there's definitely that fear that there could still be further escalation that could result in even more extreme damages to the infrastructure of these countries.
And there's so much confusion still in and around the Strait of Hormuz. There must be a lot of concern among these Gulf states, particularly because Iran is talking about controlling the strait into the future, collecting tolls there. And it looks like those Gulf nations would end up paying the vast majority of the tolls that would be applied to vessels passing through. What can they actually do about that at this point? We don't know what exactly Iran is going to do, but it must be a massive concern for the likes of the United Arab Emirates.
That's certainly the case, and that they have voiced very publicly. And in all of their public statements, they've demanded that we basically return the free flow of oil and of trade through the straits. Having Iran take control of that would be a huge geopolitical shift in the balance of power in the region. And, as you mentioned, these are states that have been moving not only their oil and gas through the straits, but also their trade. And these are countries that have, really established themselves to be global hubs, and they rely on that connectivity. And so any of that threat to that, or having themselves be sort of at the whims of Iran, is definitely a horrible outcome for them.
And what do you think the longer term impact is going to be? Very difficult to know even when the situation is going to be calmer, when the war is going to definitively end. But what kind of consequences will there be in terms of consumer and investor confidence on, these Gulf states' business and security models?
Well, you're right. And, as these states have sought to become a hub, they've also become really important tourist destinations, as I know, I'm sure you know from there in Europe. So a lot of Europeans go there. They also have been seeking to even more deeply integrate their economies into the global economy, which means bringing in people and investments and experts to live in the country. So this is something that, all of the companies and people are going to have sort of a higher risk premium and thinking about working in the Gulf. And that's really damaging to the Gulf's future prospects. I'm sure they're doing everything they can to reassure people about their responsibility, and they have provided quite impressive defense. But still, there's no way to sort of recover that sense of security that was there before fully. There'll always be that sort of doubt. And especially, as you mentioned, it depends on how the war ends, or if it ends. So if we end up in this situation of uncertainty extending with, no real arrangements or deal that are made between the United States and Iran, or periodic attacks from Israel or from the United States, that would just, extend this uncertainty, which is always very damaging.
And Kristi, do you think that different Gulf states, they might decide to adopt different strategies? Some might be tempted to do deals with Tehran, perhaps, or to try to influence US policy when it comes to both Iran and Israel?
I think that's likely. The Gulf states have been working really hard to unify their policies. Behind the scenes, they've been committing to not making arrangements with Iran without kind of coordinating with each other. But that is the reality that, as all of them have, even before the war, faced this prospects of the US not being as dominant in the region. They have had different strategies for facing new regional security. You can see the UAE moving closer to Israel, for example. You can see Oman, which was the main mediator with Iran, holding closer, being more understanding of the Iranian position. And you can see Saudi Arabia bringing in other Islamic and partners such as Turkey and Pakistan. So I think, it does look like they're sort of having different strategies already. And I imagine, again, depending on how the war ends, they're going to have different strategies towards Tehran. Although ultimately, if it does end not definitively, then they're going to have to find some way to live with this very, very difficult neighbor, even though that trust has really been severely broken.
And what kind of impact do you think all of this is going to have in terms of economic relations between these Gulf states and China, for example?
Well, they've all, obviously China is incredibly important for all of these Gulf economies, both in terms of as an importer of their product, and also trade is very high, even just more generally, and more commercial products and the like. So I don't think that will change. And it's likely as well that they will continue this path of drawing even closer to Asia and having Asia be a more important partner for them. I think that trajectory is probably going to continue, if not accelerate, as they look for other partners, both for their economy and also for their security. But at least for the present, there's not really a way to completely disconnect themselves, and I don't think they would want to from the United States. So it will look like some sort of balance, but one that they'll be looking for even more partners.
Kristi, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much, though, for being with us on the programme this evening. That's Dr. Kristi Diwan, Senior Resident Scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington. Thanks so much.